Joining me now is a UFC lightweight fighter who takes on Rustam Khabilov at UFC Fight Night 127 in London, England on March 17th. We'll talk about that fight a little bit, but he's also here to talk about the brand new UFC video game, EA Sports UFC 3. It is Raging Kajan Johnson back on the show. Kajan, how's it going?
I'm great, man. I'm great. How you doing?
I'm doing really well. Thanks again for taking the time. Really do appreciate it, and hope you've been doing well these past couple months. So, of course, just recently, just a few days ago, over the weekend, I believe maybe late last week, the new video game was released on pretty much all platforms, I guess PS4, Xbox, etc. EA Sports UFC 3. Mixed reviews, to be honest, as far as the actual game. But we're not here to break down, the ground game still is bad, the striking is improving.
Yeah.
We're here to talk about what this has sort of, the impact on fighters or the lack thereof, I think is a good way to put it.
Yeah, totally.
So I'm just going to sort of give you the floor, and I know you're not thrilled that fighters don't get paid, even though their faces, their persons are in the game. They're not getting a check in the mail. They're getting a free copy, maybe at best. What do you make of all that?
I think it's disgraceful, actually. I think it's insane. I don't understand how we're supposed to be such a forward-thinking society, a conscious society, how we're okay with a giant corporation exploiting the people like this. It doesn't make any sense to me. Across all platforms, across every single other sport, whether it's NFL, the NBA, the MLB, whatever the sport is, those athletes that are in that game are making money, dude. If they're using their face and their likeness and their name, they're going to be paid for it. They're going to be compensated for it. And we're not. It's not even on the table for discussion, really. So that's a problem. And that's something that I'm going to really put my attention on in this next little bit here. See if I can get a conversation with somebody in the UFC about this, and see if there's any way we can, if there's anything that we can do to change it. Although I'm sure very little will change. They may take the meeting just to save face, but nothing will change. Kind of like the Reebok thing, you know. I stood up, I said some stuff, and then, we had this meeting, and now there's supposed to be this, super open back and forth between the UFC and the fighters, which is kind of difficult, actually. It's not all that easy to get a hold of them and to talk to them about these things. But then, they said they were going to do something about it, and they did the absolute minimum. They gave the guys at the bottom, which is cool. You gave the guys at the bottom something, because that doesn't happen very often, but they gave the guys at the bottom like a $1,000 raise, right? So, yay, we made another $1,000 per fight, like a couple extra grand per year. Like, this does very, very little, very, very little. They really just did it to say that they were doing something. So I'm sure that if I went through the same type of channels and I talked to the same type of people about this issue, then maybe the entire roster will get like 0.5% spread amongst them, you know. But the bottom line is, until you have some leverage in this game, which we have zero without the Ali Act, there's like no leverage because there's no competition. So they have an illegal monopoly on the game, on the MMA game. So we just don't have any real leverage to negotiate with until we get into that Conor McGregor type spot. And then once we get to that spot, from what I've seen anyway through history, once we get to that spot, we start just negotiating for ourselves, and we don't really think about all the other people that are lined up behind, starving with their hands out, like begging, you know, which is another thing that's kind of despicable, the fact that everybody is willing to beg Dana White, please, Dana, please give me the 50 grand. Like, fuck off, man. Give me my money or don't give me my money, but I'm not fucking getting on my knees and begging you.
To sort of go off that point, I feel like it's not really when fighters, as you say, beg for this money. You know, as we saw at UFC Blem over the weekend, Alan Patrick, I think, stood out. I think he was the one guy on the card to to ask for that $50K bonus, and we'll see it every now and then. It seems like it's the amount of fighters asking for the bonus is increasing, which isn't a good thing. But to me, that's a bad look on the UFC, not on the fighter.
Yeah, it's a bad look on both, in my opinion. Like, it's just kind of, well, I don't know. For me personally, anyway, I can only speak for myself.
Sure.
So for me personally, my pride takes a hit if I'm like, which isn't a good thing. I shouldn't be so prideful, but still, my pride takes a hit if I'm like, oh yeah, I look what I did. Can I have $50,000 now? I did so great. Like, look at everything I did. Like, motherfucker, that's my money anyway. That's all of our money. Like, we all are owed that. I can't handle it. But yeah, it's definitely a bad look on the UFC having all these fighters like, oh man, please can I have 50 grand? Please, please, please. Like, 50 grand, really, that's not that much money, man. Everybody's like, oh my God, $50,000. That's not that much money. Not when you're looking at the revenues that they're making, not when you're looking at the amount that a fighter is able to fight within 1 year. Like, the statistics from what I'm looking at, like, it's people are fighting twice a year, dude. Like, everybody. Twice a year, 3 times a year max. And then you've got like a couple people like Cowboy for a while who went on this, I'm going to fight 7 times a year, and probably just for money, dude. Like, it's crazy. It's crazy. The amount of money that we're actually making compared to what the company is making. And I'm sick of even saying this. Like, it's just something has to change, and nothing's changing, man. It's driving me insane. It's driving me crazy. And now the video game, yeah, the video game is just it just upsets me so much to see so many fighters out there like, oh yeah, UFC 3, and I have no problem with UFC 3. Like, that video game, EA Sports, I love the EA Sports people, man. They're all like, really, I'm actually pretty close to all those guys that made that game. Like, they're great people, and I have no problem with their company because their company is just looking out for them. Once again, the UFC has failed to look out for our best interests when negotiating with another company. So we're not getting any money off of this. It's the UFC's fault. It's not EA's fault. I have no problem with EA. I have no problem with the game. I got the problem with the UFC. And I got the problem with all these other fighters posting about this game like, oh, yeah, go get the game. Go get the game. I'm going to make this post so I can get my free copy. The fact that you even have to make a fucking post in order to get a free copy of this game that your face is in,
is that what the UFC said?
Oh, I don't know. That's just what I saw on somebody's post.
Okay.
They said, yeah, I'm getting my free copy just for posting this. I forget who it was. It might have been Mike, actually, Chiesa. I'm not sure though. But regardless, everybody and their fucking dog is posting about this game. Everybody that's in it is posting about this game in order to get their free copy. And that's like, are you not even thinking of the fucking money that we all just lost? Are you not even thinking about this massive TV deal that's coming through that we're getting no points on? 0 points. 0. What the fuck? In what planet? It's insane, man.
I just looked up Michael Chiesa's Instagram, and there you go. You were bang on. He says, get your copy today, ! !3. I'm getting mine for free for posting this. Hashtag EA UFC 3, hashtag stoked. So I find that, I mean, obviously the fighter's not getting paid is bad as well. Like, obviously that's the worst part, but it's mind-boggling to me that they won't even give copies for free to every fighter. You have to make a social media post advertising the game first. I find that incredible.
It's fucking insanity, man. Like, I'm getting a free copy, but not from the UFC. EA's giving me a free copy because I worked on the game. I'm the only fucking fighter that got paid from that game, man. I'm the only UFC fighter that got paid from that game, to my knowledge anyway. There's a couple other fighters that did mocap.
I want to talk to you a bit more about that in a second. You mentioned, though, that as far as the conversation, nothing with the UFC about getting paid from the game and in the future, nothing's on the table. What do you exactly mean by that? Have you reached out, and have they just not returned your calls or messages, or is it just sort of, from the looks of it, they're certainly not wanting to budge?
I'm just judging off of past history, dude. Like, you look at all the fighters that have spoken out about the fact that we're not making any money off of this game. If you look at what they had to go through because of it, it's very, very aggressive, dude. Very aggressive tactics by the UFC when it comes to Randy Couture, when it comes to John Fitch and his camp. Like, they're like ready to cut you, dude. Like, yeah, I don't. From judging from past history, from other people's experiences, and looking for what they've gone through, it doesn't seem like it's on the table to me. Now, I'm going to reach out regardless and see what happens, but I doubt it's on the table. And if it is on the table, it would be an individual negotiation. You know, like, okay, I've reached a place where I have some leverage. You want to keep me signed under your banner. So, if, for me to renew my contract, one of my terms would be, okay, I want X amount of points off of the game, right? And somebody like Connor could pull that off, man. Somebody like George St. Pierre, or even like a Nate Diaz at this point, and TJ Dillashaw maybe, DJ probably not. Like some of these guys can pull that off, but the majority of the roster, the 99%, you know, we have no power to do that. So we're just stuck with whatever they want to give us, which is nothing. And they're making a lot of money. They sold 1.86 million copies of the EA UFC 2 game. 1.6 million copies. Now just give me like $1. Give the whole roster $1 off of every single one of those copies. You know? That's the money. That's nothing, but it's something. It's more than what we're getting now, which is just a kick in the face. You know, give us something, man. This is crazy.
Are you surprised that not as many fighters are taking a stand, and you're seeing these posts, as you said, I'm excited for the game, go buy it, etc.? Or from past history, are you not too surprised to see not many fighters sort of taking your stance?
Well, I'm not surprised, but I'm heavily fucking disappointed. I'm getting more and more disappointed with the rest of the fighters, because nobody is saying anything. Everybody is just willing to lay down, man. Just lay down and like beg at the fucking door, instead of when we own the fucking house, man. We are the house. We are the product. Without us, there's no show. It doesn't. But yet we're begging you for what? I don't get it, man. I don't get it. I don't understand how everybody doesn't see what I see. But I don't know.
So what does it take to change this? Well, I mean, I know you guys at the MMAFA are working on the Ali Act still. That's great. I think that would be a huge help. Does a union help? Like what needs to happen for fighters to start making money off these video games?
We need to form a body for sure. We need to form a union, but the union can't be a typical union. And from what I've seen on Twitter lately, the whole NLRB thing is not doing all that well under Trump right now either. So that's another issue. But we need to form a union, but not just for UFC. If it's just UFC, it just solidifies their monopoly. What we need like an ACTRA or an SAG type model for a union, so we can work with all the top companies. So put Bellator there, put ONE FC there, put UFC there. I don't know, maybe World Series of Fighting or something, or any other large, massive company that came into the game once something like this was around, and then. But we still all need to be unified with, okay, we have our own minimum wage, we have our own terms that we set. And not every fighter on the planet would be able to be in this union either, just like not every actor is able to get into ACTRA. You have to have a certain amount of credits, right? So you would have to have a certain amount of fights within a major organization that is a union organization, just like they have to get a certain amount of credits in a production that is a union production, like a large show that has a certain amount of shows on television or something. So there would be a requirement for specific promotions to become union, and there would also be a requirement for specific people, for fighters to become union. And then once they're all within the union, then would be able to work back and forth between these major promotions. The promotions would be able to share fighters, and the titles would all be under the Ali Act, right? So it would all be individual sanctioning bodies. And that's the world in my head. If I could create what's in my head and just be like, okay, we're just going to change everything, that's what I would do. I would create a union like that, the same type of model as SAG and ACTRA. It's just now how do we do that? That's the problem. How do I do that from Vancouver, Canada, by myself? You know, so I'm trying to do whatever I can. I'm still reaching out to people and collecting information and trying to figure out the problem. But once we figure out exactly how to make this union actually get it to exist, like then it will just be handing out cards. So somebody would have to hand out individual cards and get members, get all these fighters to sign on, all these fighters that are in the UFC, all these fighters that are in Bellator, all these fighters that are in ONE UFC, have to get them all to sign cards. And once we get 30% of membership, then we can be recognized, right? But yeah, it's a lot, dude. It's a lot. And even get all these fighters. Once we even got the union together, like, okay, everybody's together, now we would have to hammer out terms and, like, everybody's spread out across the entire world. It's not like ACTRA or SAG where you're working with a union for that country. You know, everybody's spread out across the whole world. So it's a really difficult thing to do, but it needs to get done because what's happening in its stead without it around is we're just being enslaved, man. It's just slavery.
Now, I'm curious, do you care that you're not in this game?
No, I don't want to be in the game, man. If they put me in that game, I'm going to be upset, dude. Like, if you put me in the game, I'm doing all the mocap. I want to do every single action that character does. So that's one way I can monetize it, but I need points on that too. That's not enough money. That's not enough money for me to be in the game. Plus, that's a hell of a lot of work. So I need to get points on that. If I'm not making money on that game, I'm causing shit, dude. Like, it's not a good scene. It's not a good time for Raging. Raging might go crazy.
Fair enough. I know you did some work, as you said, at the EA headquarters in Vancouver, where you are based, where you live. You did some motion capture stuff. Can you talk about that a little bit? What exactly did that involve? What did you do? And how did that all go?
Well, I signed an NDA, so I can't get into too many specifics.
Okay.
But I was working on the game for over a year. I did a lot of, like, the majority of the locomotion for all the characters, so that's, like, all the footwork. I also, depending on which fighter, like, everybody got assigned different fighters depending on what was in their wheelhouse. You know, some people were more karate. Some people, like a couple of us, are, like, more stocky and, like, jacked, so you look more like a heavyweight. You know, so I did a lot of different fighters' actions. I don't think I can name names. I wish I could, though. I wish I knew exactly what I could say and couldn't say about it. But I did a lot of fighters, like a lot of the a lot of famous fighters on that game are me. You most likely, if you're playing a fighter, like it's like a 50-50 or 1/3, 30% chance that I'm the guy that did all the action for it.
That's kind of hilarious how you're not actually in the game, but you kind of are. You're kind of just everybody.
I am the game, bro. I am the game.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Have you played it since the release, since it's been done and sealed and all that? Have you sat down and been able to play it? Did you go to the EA headquarters and play, or have you not had a chance to yet?
No, I haven't played it. I don't really play games, man.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not a game guy. I don't like to do things that I'm not good at, and I'm not good at video games because I was never really brought up allowed to play video games when I was a kid. So for me to go and learn how to play video games and get good at them, that's going to take time. A, I don't really have that time, and B, I don't want to commit that time to something as useless as learning how to play video games. You know, I'd rather do something that's going to further my career, make me money in some way, you know?
For what it is worth, I talked to UFC flyweight Ben Wen, and I'm just saying this kind of as a joke, but I talked to Ben Wen a few days ago, and he's a big gamer, and he told me how playing video games will help with his stress levels in fights, and ultimately, as we've seen with Demetrius Johnson and some other fighters, they can make money. So just proving your point wrong, Kajan.
Yeah, no, you can make money if you're like, if you want to commit all that time to it and go and do that Twitch thing.
It's a lot of work if you're gonna make
exactly.
some money.
It's a whole other hustle in itself, right? So I'm not passionate about it. So I'm not gonna commit that much time to anything I'm not passionate about. And as for it bringing down stress levels, there's much more efficient ways to bring down stress levels that don't involve being plugged into technology. Technology is actually bad for stress levels. So where it could be better than like just grinding and going crazy at the gym, yeah, if that's what you need for you to shut your brain off, that's okay. But there's levels, right? So try meditation.
For sure. You mentioned at the beginning of this interview, of course, we talked about way back in September this financial initiative that Reebok was sort of giving to the fighters in October of last year. Was that what you're talking about? Did it end up just being that $1,000 raise for the lower level fighters?
Yeah, the $1,000 raise, and then for like 1 fight to 3 fights, I believe, and then 4 fights on your 4th fight, then you get $4,000, and then on your 4 and 5 get $4,000, and then 6 to 10 are back at $5,000 again. Like, yeah, it changed almost nothing. Although like a lot of fighters are put into those first categories, it's still like we're asking for a piece of bread, and they gave us a little crumb. You know, they gave us like a piece of flour. Here's some flour. You got to get a whole bunch more stuff to make bread. But yeah,
did you expect more, or just from past, experiences with this promotion, were you not very surprised?
I wasn't surprised at all. They'll always do the minimum. You know, what does any corporation care about? What does any massive company care about? $billion company? They care about their bottom line, man. That's what they care about. They care about their piece of the pie. And their piece of the pie can't get smaller. In fact, their piece of the pie has to keep getting bigger. That's how these sociopathic capitalists work, right? It has to keep growing. If it's not growing, then it's not doing what it's supposed to do, and everybody, needs to freak out. And they'll do that at any cost. They don't really care. They don't care about anything else. That's all. When it comes down to it, that's all they actually care about. And once you realize that, then it makes things a lot easier, because then you don't have to care about them so much. You know, you don't have to be so empathetic about, but what about the company? Oh, but it's done so much to get here. Like, yeah, it has done a lot to get here, but so have we, man. So have we. I've given my life, my blood, my vision, my brain to this sport for almost 2 decades now, and there's been thousands and thousands of martial artists right now as well as before that have been doing the same thing for years and years and years. And for just as long and even longer, there's been people trying to monopolize the industry and gain sole access to all the best fighters and keep them all under one roof. And the battle continues, you know. Now this UFC machine is the big enemy. Right, but before that, it was different. It was Don Kings and the whole boxing world till they got the Ali Act. Now they have power. Now it's way harder to control them, right? So eventually the same thing will happen here. But right now it's people got to dig trenches and actually fight to make that happen.
Let's move away from video games. Let's move away from Reebok. And my last question for you, it's prediction time. March 17th, London, England. You're taking on Rustam Khabilov in the lightweight division. A, is this your biggest test to date? And B, how do you get the job done?
I think it's pretty at par with the Adriana Martins test. if anything, I think Martins is a bit more difficult to solve that puzzle than the Khabilov puzzle. Because the Martins fight, he had knockout power in both hands, and he's a southpaw. And then he had great wrestling and great jiu-jitsu on the ground. Khabilov is orthodox. He's got knockout power in one hand and has great wrestling, probably better than Martins, but Martins did take him down a couple times. But on the ground, he's not all that great. He's nothing to write home about, So I think that this is an easier problem to solve. I don't know what exactly I'm going to solve it with. I've got a bunch of different options, so I can't really give you a prediction as to how the fight's going to go. I can see me winning probably in the third round, but who knows, dude? Who knows with what? Who knows with what? There's so many options.
Well, Kajan, thank you. As always, really appreciate you coming on, and it's always a pleasure to talk to you. I feel like you have an opinion not everybody shares, but more often than not, it seems like it's the more realistic opinion. So it's always good to talk to you. Remind my audience before I let you go where they can find you on social media, and if there's anybody you'd like to thank or give a shout-out to, the floor is yours.
Awesome, man. Thanks. Great to have me on, man. It's been a really good time. So first of all, shout out my Twitter, I am Ragin, and then my Instagram is TheRagin1, THARAGIN, the number 1. My gym, TriStar Vancouver, TriStar Vancouver on Instagram, and I want to shout out Receptra. These guys have been a really, really great company for me. I've been working with them now for a bit. A CBD company based out of Colorado. Amazing product, dude. I feel like a new man. So, yeah, you want some CBD, man, check out Receptra.